If you're responsible for administering and managing Microsoft Intune, then this is the ultimate getting started guide that you will find invaluable. Are you ready to learn? Greetings, my fellow YouTubers. Nice to see you, and I really do appreciate you visiting my channel. In today's episode, I've had a number of requests for Andy, can you go through some of the basics of getting started in Microsoft Intune? Well, I thought, that's a really good idea. Now, over the last couple of years, Intune continues to go from strength to strength. But along with that, it becomes more and more sophisticated and perhaps a little tricky to understand. So I wanted this to be the ultimate guide to take you through Intune, administering Intune anyway, step by step. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I would really appreciate if you would click the subscribe button and ring that bell. And if you've got comments and questions, as always, get them down below. Now, I want to put my heart out to all of you and say a huge thank you for nominating me for the UK Community Best YouTube Channel of 2023. I really do appreciate it. If you'd like to vote for me, then I'll put the link there below. Please go ahead and do that. Okay, so I think without any further ado, let's jump in and let's take a look at administering Microsoft Intune from scratch. So the first thing that we need to discuss about Intune is the license. I have a user here. I'm a huge Trekkie, as many of you know. I'm going to go into Jean-Luc's account here. I'm just going to copy Jean-Luc here, just take a note of his address. The first thing then is I'm going to come into licenses, and you need to make sure that the user is licensed. Now, in this example, I'm using what we call Enterprise Mobility and Security, or EM&S. And you can see there are two versions of EM&S. You can, if you've got an E5 subscription, and you can bolt on the Enterprise Mobility and Security. Please note that if you've got an E3, there's also an EM&S version for E3. And also in Business Premium, you also get EM&S as well. Well, you get a version of it, okay? So you get the mobility features in Business Premium. Ultimately though, if you don't have these plans, you could always bolt them on. So Intune comes as a standalone license, which is fairly low cost, if I have to be honest with you. So I'm going to just go ahead and save my changes here. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is machine states. So let's just have a quick look at that. So to understand device states, we really need to talk about three different options here. Now in the slide, of course, it's referring to Azure AD. Do remember that I am talking about Entra ID as it was recently renamed. So Azure AD registered, basically, if it's allowed, users can join their own devices. Typically, this is used through BYOD, bring your own device, and elements like that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that the tenant administrator or Intune administrator will be able to fully manage this device, but it can take advantage of things like applications and also things like security features like conditional access. Azure AD joined is the full booner, essentially full single sign-on into Azure Active Directory, and you can also manage this, so you can extend that and manage this device in Intune, which includes the full deployment of the device, applications, and security. The third option is a hybrid Azure AD joined device, and this is ultimately where the device is joined to Active Directory. And in Active Directory, it's Active Directory that has sole responsibility for not just provisioning the users, but also managing the device properties in terms of features like group policy and security settings. So to understand Intune, you need to understand not only what it is, but also what it can do. So it's a multi-management platform that allows administrators to manage both mobile devices, PCs, Macs, as well as other platforms. These devices can be connected either directly Azure AD joined, which I'll give you a demo in a second, or they can be what we call hybrid Azure AD joined. So hybrid means that they're connected via Active Directory, which is the local directory service that many companies still use, which is stored on, of course, Windows Server. So Intune, once the devices are inside Intune, are ingested into Intune, administrators can then secure them with various security and compliance policies, as well as being able to deploy updates, software, patching, as well as, of course, keep up to date with things like applications. So I'm currently logged in at this workstation as a regular administrator, and one of the first things we're going to want to do, of course, is join this machine to Azure Active Directory, aka Entra ID. So I'm simply going to come on to the settings here. I am going to just scroll down, and we have this accounts option here. And all we need to do is just scroll down, and it says, do you want to access your work or school? So I absolutely do. So I'm going to click in here, and I have a user here called Jean-Luc Picard. Now, just a couple of things here. If you just set up work or school account here, this would just register the device. Okay, so this means it's registered in the directory, but you can't really manage it, okay? And often you might do this if it's, say, bring your own device or something like that. But the main things that we do have here are these two here. So you can join this device to Azure Active Directory, and this means that it could be fully managed in Azure AD. And on top of that, if you have the Intune license, you can also manage it in Intune and all of the features, for example, deploying software, managing security, and so on. If, however, you have the device connected to a local Active Directory domain, this is more the traditional client-server type model where the server is on premises, and this machine would be deployed, managed, and administered by your domain administrator. Okay, now it can be one or the other. You can't have both. And just a word of warning, if you wanted to change this, you would need to reset the machine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to just come in here and join this device. I'm going to say I want to join it to Azure Active Directory. So first of all, of course, we need a username. So I've got my username here, and this is Picard. So again, I've checked that he's licensed, so he's fully licensed, and I'm now just going to put in his password here. So off he goes, and I'm now going to do a Azure domain join. Okay, so it takes a couple of minutes, and it just says, are you sure this is the organization that you want to join? So I said, yep, absolutely, I'm going to do that. Okay, so we're all set. So now all I need to do, you can see it's now connected to the organization. It's also showing me the username as a UPN or user principal name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just restart this machine, and then we'll come back to it in a moment. Okay, so you can see I'm put my password in. I'm logging back on as Jean-Luc, and let's have a look at what's happened. Well, first of all, I'm going to click back into the start button. I'm going to come back into those settings, and let's now have a look. So I'm just scrolling right down. I'm going to go back into the user accounts. And here you can see that Jean-Luc is in here. If I go back into Access Work and School, you can see that he's connected. So it's an agent. The agent is connected. I can have a look, and it tells me all about the account. And if the user was offline for some reason, this would sync any updates. It would also sync any applications and data and so on. So of course, one of the big benefits of this is the fact that you get full single sign-on. So for example, if I just go to, let's say, office.com here, you can see instantly the user gets signed in and thus a lot more productive. So I don't need to sign in and do any kind of configuration. So from the end user perspective, this is absolutely fantastic. Now, so what we've talked about there is what Intune is. We've talked about licensing, and we've also done here an Azure AD join. Now, what we're going to do is let's have a look now at how you configure Microsoft Intune. So coming into the Microsoft 365 portal, there's just a little flag here that just says, you know, you've got 5 global admins. If you're going to have an Intune administrator, you might want to consider having a dedicated Intune administrator. This is all part of Microsoft's Zero Trust strategy. Only give users and admins the rights that they actually need to perform the task. Okay, so that aside, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here. I'm going to come into Endpoint Manager, and this brings us into the Microsoft Intune Admin Center. So let's have a look at what we can see. So Intune is actually, I suppose, a combination of different products. So by default, you get the home screen here, and you can see it gives us a nice overview of everything. You can bring on, you've also got this dashboard here as well. And again, you can see I get a nice kind of helicopter overview that everything is now up to date. So Intune itself is a combination of different products and features. So we can manage devices in Intune. We can also manage applications, and of course, very importantly, we can also manage security on those devices. From that, we can then produce reports, and these are essentially just shortcuts into the user settings in Microsoft 365 and also Entra ID. We also have tenant administration here as well, which covers the entire tenant. So I suppose the first place that we should start is the devices. So let's have a look at this. So first of all, we can see that we have a number of devices already enrolled. And one of the really cool things about this mobile device management platform is the fact that we've got Windows. We can bring in Windows devices, iOS and iPads, Mac OS, Android, Chrome OS actually, which is really gaining in popularity now, as well as various iterations of Linux as well. Now, in order to get started and say, okay, I want to manage my Microsoft 365, the first place that we really need to come into, though, is we need to come into identity. And when we talk about identity, of course, we're talking about the Entra ID Admin Center. And initially what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here into devices, and if I click into overview here, so you can see here that I have a number of devices, and I've already gone ahead and added in these devices, and you can see that some of these devices, they're all running Windows, but some of them are hybrid Azure AD joined, whereas some of them are Azure AD joined, like I just demonstrated. So here we have our, we've got our WS3. So here's our Seattle WS3 machine here, and you can see that this has been joined by Jean-Luc Picard. So I'm often asked, Andy, what's the difference between a hybrid Azure AD join? So this is a traditional machine that's traditionally joined to Active Directory. And if I click into the properties of this, you can see that I can get a few details of the machine, but the thing is you can't manage this machine, yes? So you can only manage the machine if it's actually within Intune itself. So you have got limited functionality here. And in other words, this machine, the authority for this machine lies with Active Directory and tools like group policy and so on. All right. Now, things that you can do with it, you can add it to an administrative unit. You can take advantage of the local admin password recovery feature or LAPS, which is quite good. But in terms of management, it's pretty limited. You can use, of course, System Center or group policy, as I've just mentioned. All right. So that's the DAT. And now if I come back to the machine that I just added, though this is my WS3 machine, this is Jean-Luc's machine. You can see that I now get the full inventory of hardware, who the user is. I can also manage this machine as well. You can disable it, you can delete it. There are some functions here, by the way, that you require a Intune Suite license. But in terms of the management, I can click in and you can see that this actually takes me, this is kind of a window into Intune here. So I can do things like I can retire this device. I can do a remote wipe of the device as well. I can delete the device. I can do that sync feature. You can restart it. And you can also, of course, perform antivirus scans and rename. So again, quite a lot of functionality. In addition, you also get the hardware features here. You get a list of any discovered applications on this device, which can be useful. There's nothing on it at the moment. And of course, you can also see the device compliance and configuration that I'm going to talk about in a moment. So the key thing here is you have full control of this device. All right. So just heading back then, going back into Azure Active Directory, or Entra ID, of course, as it's now known, how do we switch on this feature? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back into my identity. So just come back into the back into Entra Admin Center, and I'm going to scroll down. I'm just going to show more, and we have a settings area here, and I'm going to click into this area here. It says mobility. Okay, so in here we have a couple of really important features, and the first one here is, do you want to add mobile device management and mobile application management? So MDM, now do I have to use Intune? Of course not. No, you don't. You can use AirWatch or any of these others, but the fact is I've got a license for it, so this is the one that I'm going to use. So I'm clicking into Intune here, and first of all, mobile device management. Do you want your users to be able to use mobile device management? So in other words, you can have your users join it. I'm going to say, yes, I want all of my users here. And you can see how do they discover if they want to either join the device as a corporate device or as a registered device. You can provide them with the discovery URL here. Likewise, mobile application management. So you can deploy applications to both managed as well as unmanaged devices. So for example, guest access and so on. Just a point about mobile device management, by the way, every Microsoft platform, if you will, has access to mobile device management in one form or another. So in the most basic form, you can manage mobile devices, phones, but if you want to manage PCs and Macs, you really do need this Microsoft Intune add-on here. So just be aware of that, okay? So the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pop into my devices, all devices here, and you can see that you have all your devices. Now you can see here that although we have a number of devices here in Entra ID, aka Azure Active Directory, if I go into devices in Intune, we don't have as many devices here. That's because only these devices are actually not just Azure AD joined, but they're also managed in Intune as well. So, however, here there are some really important settings. So I can go into the device settings here, and then we've got some options. So users may join their devices. So you may only want certain users, for example, to be able to join their devices. Users can register their devices, and also are you going to require multi-factor authentication? I mentioned the local admin password solution, or LAPS service, which is currently in preview, and you can see that this is on at the moment. You can also restrict users from recovering BitLocker, so that's the encryption keys. We also have a really important feature. Now, you know, in Windows, every user has a user policy and a computer policy. So, for example, you know, it stores your desktop settings, or your, you know, when you click on My Documents, it might go to your OneDrive for Business, for example. So in enterprise state roaming, what this does, it copies all your profiles, your user profiles, and it stores those in Microsoft Azure, which absolutely rocks, by the way. So let's pop back then into Intune and see what we can do in Intune. So first of all, you're going to want to enroll your devices. And you can enroll in a couple of things. So you can do automatic enrollment. So if you want to allow your users to automatically enroll into Intune, not MDM, but Intune, you're going to need to come into here. And again, you can see I've configured all, and again, all here. So that's the first thing. I've configured automatic enrollment. Now, in addition, you can also configure things like co-management. So if you're using Config Manager to manage both in cloud and on-premises solutions, you've got that tool here. And in addition, you can also take advantage of Microsoft's Autopilot deployment program. And if you've not seen my video on this, definitely go and check it out, and I'll put the link in the description below. Now, other types of enrollment, of course, as well as Windows enrollment, you can also deploy things like Windows Hello for Business. So if you're using biometrics, facial recognition, and so on, you can deploy that here. One of my favorite ones, though, is, Andy, what if I want to deploy Apple devices in my organization? Well, this is really simple. What you're going to need to get, though, is an MDM push certificate from Apple. So basically just follow the instructions here. You go to the Apple website and you will be issued with a Apple push certificate. So all you do is import that certificate here. The advantage of that is everything then lights up, and I can then start creating, if I go back into devices here, for example, once your devices are enrolled, then we can start configuring policies. So primarily things like configuration settings. You've also got compliance policies. Maybe you want to run some scripts and so on. But the fact is that for those mobile devices, those Apple devices, typically what you would do is you would create, let's say, a configuration profile. And a configuration profile here, I'll give you a little demo of it. So I'm going to create a config profile, and in fact you can see here's one I created just recently, actually. So I'll just pop into this profile. Let me just, in fact, I'll just edit this profile, and let me just edit it here. So first of all, what are the properties of the profile? So you can put in the name and so on. You can then say, okay, who am I going to assign this profile to? So in this case, you can see I've assigned this to my Oslo devices, and I'll show you that in a moment. So I've created a group and I've added those devices in. You can also, of course, deploy it to all users as well. So for example, if you were in a school or something like that. You can also include and exclude users as well if you want to. Then the next step is, of course, configuring the device. So what features and functionality do you want to enable for that device? And there are literally loads of settings that you can configure. And you would take your time typically going through this. Now, the nice thing about this, of course, is this is all the configuration settings for the devices. And this can include, for example, I've switched off gaming, and you might want to block in-app purchases. So if you were in a school, essentially you create the profile, you see, you deploy that profile to those devices, or let's say the year 5 students, and essentially what happens is you go onto your phone, you dial up your Apple vendor and you go, hello, I'd like 1,000 devices, please. And they would go, absolutely no problem. Are you a member of the DEP program, the device enrollment program? And you go, I am. Here is my number. And they will then ship those 1,000 devices to the school, and the kids will receive them shrink wrapped. There's nothing that you need to do. And when they unwrap them, connect to the internet, immediately goes, hang on, that is managed by this organization. And it will then deploy the profile. Of course, so you deploy the profile. You can also deploy apps as well. So again, you have got iOS and iPad apps. You can just simply add these in and deploy them. So 1,000 iPads, just like that. Absolutely superb it is. Okay, so a configuration profile, as I've said, I can create a configuration profile here, and essentially you choose the platform. So is this for Android? So depending on the Android platform that you're using, iPad, iOS, Mac OS, Windows, of course, or even Windows 8.1 and lower. So again, that's what you do, and you walk through those steps that I've just done. Now, as well as configuration profiles, compliance should be at the forefront of your mind. Security is so important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new compliance policy, and I'm going to create this for my iPad and iOS devices. I'm going to click next, and we'll just call this my Oslo compliance for, let's say, iOS. Okay. I'll click next. And again, you can go through, do you want email on the device? What's the device health? You might want to block things like jailbroken devices. So I can say yes. What's the device properties? Are you going to support a minimum and maximum OS version, a build version? So if you're supporting these devices, you don't want like really old devices. Things like device properties, if you're using the Defender for endpoint and you want to integrate that, and then you've got things like system security as well. So do you want to require a password, block simple passwords? You can force the password expiration after a number of days. And check it out, you can even restrict certain apps on the device as well, which is really nice. So you get the idea. So you can enforce things like biometrics, so fingerprint, facial recognition as part of that policy. So, and you can then say, okay, well, what happens if the device is non-compliant? Well, you can, in the first instance, send an email to the user, and then you can add in another one. And so in the second instance, send a notification. And then if they still don't respond, You can, of course, remotely lock the non-compliant device, and then ultimately, if they've not responded after a number of days, you could essentially retire that device. And again, these are really nice options. So again, I'm going to assign this to a group of users. So again, I could say I'm going to bring this to my Oslo IT devices, and I'm going to select next, and you can see I have now created my compliance policy. How cool is that? So now, of course, once my users are onboarded, I will have or be able to see regular reports. Now, in terms of applications, I can also come into the applications, and you can see that I have a number of platforms here. I can say, hey, I want to deploy a particular app, so no problem. I can go to the App Store. So in this case, I can go to the Microsoft Store here. Okay, so we now have the Zoom player, gives me all the publisher information. Do I want to show the app in the company portal? Yeah, I'll make it available. And also you can bring in other information in here as well. For example, if you've got a logo, so I can bring in a logo for this particular app if I wanted to. So again, I'm going to click on next. And again, I can say, hey, do you want to assign this user to a group of users, or do I want to make it available for any enrolled devices? So enrolled means that you've enrolled the device onto the machine, but it's optional whether the user wants to install it. And you can also, this is the cool thing about this, is you can uninstall this on the fly as well. So again, I can simply click on add, and I'm going to add in my Oslo group again, and I bring in my Oslo devices, and I'll click next, and I get a nice overview and finish. So once the users start downloading that app, this will then start to wake up, you see? So there we go. So you've got your apps. What else have we got here? Well, we talked about device compliance. What about application? So you might want to create what we call a protection policy. You might want to configure the application. Again, in this video, I'm only doing a demo, but hopefully it'll get you started. So as well as configuration policies, we've also got things like protection policies. And this is really nice. So here's one I made earlier. I can go in, I can look at the properties. Let's have a quick look here at this. And I can target, let's say, specific apps. So if I click onto the app, I've targeted that Zoom app here. And if I go into the policy, I can say, okay, what do I want the policy to do? Am I targeting all apps, Microsoft apps, or any kind of core Microsoft apps? Well, in this case, I'm just selecting the Zoom for Intune app here. So that's the app that I'm targeting. So I'll click on next. Okay, and I'm going to click on, just close that down. So going back into the properties, I can now say, okay, this is the app that I want to monitor. So now I can say, right, data protection. So am I going to allow iTunes to back up the data on this? So I can block it or I can allow it. I can set some exemptions on the apps. For example, if you might block the app from sending information, from blocking document types, cut, copy and paste. I can encrypt the app as well. I can restrict the functionality. I don't want the user to be able to print. So you can choose whether to print or not. Am I going to allow to transfer data from one device to another and so on? Do you get the idea? So you can see here that the protection policies are absolutely so powerful. So you could prevent printing, downloading, and so on. So again, another way that you can protect not only the users, but also the behavior of the device as well. So again, what we've looked at, we've seen the devices by the platform. I've talked about enrolling the devices and also a number of these profiles and policies. In terms of conditional access, I've ran a number of sessions previously, videos. You can check those out in my identity playlist, so check out that. The other thing that you can do, of course, is you can also manage updates as well. So typically, we can create what we call update rings. So an update ring is essentially here, we can basically, I'll just edit this one, by the way. So if I just go into my properties of this update ring settings. So what do we mean by an update ring? Well, Microsoft basically has two types of download updates. So product updates and also things like Windows drivers and so on. So we have core Windows updates, and you can say, hey, we've got quality updates which are critical, and they can also include things like security features. And you've also got feature updates. And feature updates, those things they're nice to have, but not absolutely essential. But you can defer them for a period of time. So quality updates, you can defer them for up to 30 days, and feature updates, you can defer them for up to 180 days, or 6 months actually. And this is great if you've got a very large environment. So as well as those update rings, you can create the update rings. You can also decide how do you want to deploy those quality and feature updates as well. So for example, you might choose to say, hey, I want to deploy quality updates within 7 days and feature updates within 14 days. And you can see that you can also control the other platform updates there as well. Now, in addition, we also have endpoint security here as well in Intune. And here you can control the security features, mostly Windows devices, as well as other platforms as well. So we've got some things like, firewall settings, if you want to configure things like disk encryption. You've got things like app control for business, and this is currently in public preview. You've also got some awesome features like things like attack surface reduction. So removing unwanted software, shutting down certain services, closing certain ports. And essentially what we're doing is we're making it less attractive to potential hackers. You can also do account protection. So it protects user accounts on those devices. In addition, you've also got things like reporting. So you have got a whole bunch of different reports that you can look at. Microsoft Intune. Definitely check it out, and I hope that this video has given you a little bit of an eye-opener. So there you have it, administering Microsoft Intune. Very, very cool. So there you go, Microsoft Intune from scratch. I really hope that you found that useful. If you did, bump the like button up there. It does make a difference to the channel. Now, if you want to go and take your skills even further, why not considering signing up to my Patreon site? Patreons get a whole host of extras, including full-length course materials. Check it out with the link below there. That's it for this time. I'll see you next time. Thanks very much. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button and you won't miss out.